Welcome to Desire Dilemma, a podcast that amplifies immigrant voices in America. I'm Funmi Apantaku-Onayemi, your host. As we wrap up Season 1, we'll bring you highlights from some of our guests about their coming to America, the struggles they faced, and the challenges they overcame. Please enjoy some nuggets of wisdom, imprints of values, and pointers of success.
I grew up in a very small town in the southern part of Poland, near Wrocław. So the name of my town was Świdnica. And because Poland was under communist rule and it was the Cold War, we actually had a Russian military base in my town. So a big part of the town was actually separated for the Russians, where we had no access to. It was, very poor back then. Gray and dark. I think Poland was still largely suffering from the post-war depression that was dragging on for decades. So a lot of the buildings were, falling apart. The infrastructure was, it was very, very poor. It was definitely very economically depressed. You could feel it. I remember living through martial law. So it was a very difficult time in Poland, and knowing that there was an escape to that was definitely a light at the end of the tunnel, but it was scary at the same time.
I left when I was 18. That's the time of the draft. Every young man of age of 18 in Soviet Union, same in Russia right now, obligated to serve, to pay the dues, quote unquote, to your motherland and sacrifice 2 years of your life to the army.
My childhood was very normal, I would say. I grew up with 4 older sisters, and we all went into the same grade schools together. I had my grandparents around that monitored everything we did and everywhere we went. My dad was a golfer, and so he was very busy, and my mom was in the hotel industry. And it was a very busy type of family. But it was nice, cohesion, coherent. We had lots to do. We played lots of games. And, it was just a nice family, all sisters at one point. And then 10 years later, a boy came along. And so we were always close, and we're still close today.
I reflected back on my childhood. I had a very awesome childhood. I think it was a little complicated before we came to the United States, in the fact that, as you mentioned, my mother had a business. And essentially, we were the business between myself, my younger brother, and my uncle. And, so that made upbringing or childhood just a little tougher for us. I mean, obviously, at the time, we thought it was this immense suffering that we were facing. But the reality is the fact that she had that business, it made life a whole lot better for us. We were able to afford certain things that other children in the neighborhood couldn't. But you know what? The experience toughened us because, day in and day out for a number of years, we had to aid in the business and keep it going.
Tell us about Jamaica, your childhood.
Oh, it's a beautiful place, nice warm weather. The population is mixed. Everybody is mixed together, each nationality, wherever you are from. We all go up on the same block. We were poor, but not starving. But I've always been a person looking for better, not just for me, but for my family. And a woman came to me one day and said she was from Guatemala, and she wanted to give me a vacation here for a week, and it was Chicago. And so I thought about it. I had 4 days to make up my mind, and I had to borrow. I didn't have a lot of money, but family and friends lent me the money, and I went to Chicago.
I came initially with just a simple motive of coming to relax and return back to my job in Nigeria as a banker. That was my simple reason for coming.
How did you feel just going outside of Nigeria?
There was excitement because the anticipation of seeing my father and being with him and not having seen him, consistently, I would say at that point for maybe 7 years or so, and just the anticipation of being in this new environment. So, there was that anticipation. There was certainly the comfort of seeing my father after just this long stretch of period of not having been with him. And then I would say a lot of mixed emotion because I was leaving and we were leaving our uncle behind.
My father moved here in 1984, so it was just me and my mom and my sisters living by ourselves for a couple of years, and then my mom joined him in early of 1988 with my oldest sister, leaving my middle sister and myself behind with my grandparents who took care of us. And because tickets were really expensive and we couldn't afford to move all of us at the same time, my parents were slowly moving us one bit at a time. So they bought my ticket for December of that year in 1988. I was underage and I needed assistance, and I didn't speak a lick of English back then. It was very scary. And it was just me sitting in the window seat and largely by myself with just the assistant from the flight crew.
I still remember the moment when I was looking through the window of airplane, looking at those stupid police, they actually called militia at that time, militia jeeps cruising around. I was just waving my hand silently and saying, okay, I will never have to see this thing again in my life.
I remember my first day. I came to visit my aunt, who I ended up staying with. She owned a corner store. She would have to get up at 4 a.m. And so I would have to go with her because she couldn't leave me home alone. I was the only child in the house. And I remember waking up and driving to her store in the dark, she's opening all the locks on this door. And then I would go in the back on a single pull-out bed and sleep until I guess the sun came up over and I was ready. And I remember opening the curtains to the store and being very shy and very withdrawn and very quiet. And I remember that very clearly. That was my first day. And I still have the feelings from it as well. The feeling was just, oh, what do I do now? kind of.
My first day in the US was in New York. I saw the magnificent airport, different from where I left. I was not too disappointed because I do see a lot of that in the movies. But seeing them physically was something that was amazing. But after a few hours before the transit to the next day that I got to the Chicago, I felt a little bit disappointed when I found myself on the streets of Chicago with a couple of few families and I saw miscreants. And that reminded me of Mushi, the fear you pass through when you take a walk in Oshodi at night. So it was mixed reactions. And I then believed truly poverty can never be eradicated on the surface of the earth.
The cold was surprising to me. Obviously, not something that we were prepared for or anticipated for, because our attire, the way that we dressed, we certainly were not in. We did not have gloves. We wore the traditional, Nigerian attire at the time, which was very light. So getting off of the airplane and getting into this cold environment was not ready for that, and that was very surprising. The other thing that was surprising is, there was no mystery about it. It was just another place, with, pavement and ground and trees and buildings. It wasn't this shock and awe that I was really expecting. So those things were surprising to me.
I had a visitor's visa, applied for an alien registration card. Mm-hmm. And that took me 11 months. I couldn't leave the country, so I stayed here. I would go to the north side. This woman told me from Guatemala, she said, you can go there and work with other people who have children. Take care of them, clean up, and they will pay you, and you wouldn't get deported. So that's what I did for 11 months. But I struggled, like I said before, for 6 years. But I wouldn't give up because everybody in my family was depending on me.
It was really hard. Not knowing the language, it was extremely scary and difficult. And my parents made sure that we were in a neighborhood where, we were not really in the Polish community. So I was really thrown in the deep end of the water, and they enrolled me in the Catholic school where there were no Polish kids. So I was, I remember my first month was just before Christmas. So it was, it was fun. I had a little bit of a break, but right after the Christmas break, my parents enrolled me in the school. And I remember my father just dropped me in front of the school and told me to go in. So I didn't really have that assistance of getting some help and not knowing the language. It was just extremely terrifying and scary. But I had a lot of help from the school. They definitely made an effort to help me acclimate.
I left at 16, and when I found out that I was going to stay and live in Miami, I had to go through the immigrant process. I had to register myself. Because they, any school age students have to be in school. It's just mandatory no matter where you're from, right? So I remember trenching in the dark, in the rain, going down to immigration way south in Miami, filling out my paperwork so I can become a student. Then they bust kids out of Miami, Liberty City into Hialeah. So I had to be on the bus stop at 5:30 in the morning, in the dark, by myself, only a few blocks away from home, but driving on the bus all the way in Hialeah, in the dark. I graduated from Hialeah Senior High School. It was a great experience. I was the pom-pom girl, the only one of color out of 22 girls. I was smack dead in the middle. I was doing my thing. It was a phenomenal experience.
High school that I attended, a majority of it, as it's known here, are African Americans. I would say 99% of the kids there were African American. And so they had the same skin tone as I did. But interesting enough, I was still different and odd to them, right? So, you heard terms like, oh man, you're from Nigeria. Or you're from Africa, do the women out there just run around naked? Do you guys play with lions? And, and like all of these things, and I'm like, what are we talking about here? But, they were coming off of the experience of what they've seen on either the Discovery Channel, the propaganda that, is that they grew up with, or the way that they've been preconditioned in the society. So that there was a little bit of a challenge there.
I couldn't get a pair of shoes to buy at Madison and State. That was a shopping center, then they call it downtown. I couldn't buy anything in that store at Weebles.
Oh my. Why?
Yes.
They won't let you in?
No, you sit there and nobody attends to you. You just sit
Wow.
there for an hour and nobody say anything to you. I tell the person, you had this show on display. I took one foot, I said, can I get this in size 7.5? And nobody talk and talk. Somebody white came in, they sold them and they go back talking. It was all young white men. So even in the 70s, there was prejudice here in Chicago.
So I came over as a student. I graduated with my associate's degree, went home for 1 year. I felt closed in. I felt small. To be on a rock, it was like being on a rock. The water can just roll over at any point. So I had that fear in mind. After that, I went to Chicago as a student. Then I was on an ambassador status visa. And then I found myself here living and working in America without a status that allowed me to work here in America. I mean, you hear about people marrying relatives and you hear about people, paying $10,000 or thousands of dollars to marry someone so that they can stay here. Well, as a very strong Christian, I didn't want to do anything of that sort because I wanted to get married one day, hopefully, and have children. But God blessed me with a wonderful man, and 28 years later, I'm still with the same man.
I had a lot of challenges growing up, but having lived that immigrant lifestyle. So I grew up, I started college, but didn't have money to finish college. So I got a nail tech license, and I was working in a nail shop in Lincoln Park. And because you have that immigrant work ethic, you're a workhorse. You're constantly pushing yourself and working really hard. One of my clients actually worked in the ad industry, and she approached me about an opportunity at the company where she was working at. And she said, "Hey, I really think you'd be good at this." And so I started working in the ad industry in my 20s and actually made that my career. So I've been doing it for 20 years and really loving it. And now I'm working at a startup as a director of operations. And it's, that whole experience really prepared me to continue to work hard and not waste any opportunities that come my way.
I started to work. I did not say, "Oh, me, a banker," but they saw that this boy is not just somebody who is actually really poor in Nigeria, that is desperate to stay in this country like that. So because they saw I was just so humble, and I was just doing whatever they asked me to do. I saw it like, okay, this is just a new phase that I need to learn something from. So from there, I realized there are so many other things that I can do better, even with the restaurants. And after then, I decided to move to something better again elsewhere. I did car washing, before I became a small man that I am today.
One sunny day, I hear the knocking at the door, and I could see 3 or 4 guys from the theater company running into the place in search to find me. And when I saw them running my way, I immediately had to escape somewhere. There was a door to the basement, so I ran to the basement, and I was desperate to find the safe spot, and I couldn't. Everything was exposed, the boxes, the tchotchkes. Then I see this coffee bag, empty coffee bag, the big giant where they have 100-pound weight mashed bags. I jumped in one of those bags, and I was sitting breathless inside of the bag through the mesh, looking what will happen to me. The guys passed by me a couple times. I'm glad they didn't kick the bag just to see if anybody is there, but they were 6 inches away from me. And I guess it was my final pantomime moment when I had to pretend that I'm dead, and not move at all. When they left, the relief and catharsis was through the roof.
Do you miss home?
An understatement. I miss my 2 boys. Like I told you a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about his academics, and it was just like, oh, when I left you, you were just 9 and you were still in elementary that time. And the next thing that poor boy told me, he said, "Dad, I can't wait to see you again." I just lost my emotion and I started to cry. I can't wait to see you again. That again meant so much to me, because something just told me, what if I die today? It means that again may not be there. And I started crying. He prayed for me and I prayed for him also, but it was an understatement. I miss those 2 great men that I left behind.
You must miss something about your country. What do you miss?
I don't miss anything.
Oh my. Wrong question, huh?
No, I don't feel guilty.
Okay.
And I don't feel bad. No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I came here at 16. This is all I know. I can't miss something that I don't know. I enjoy going home. I enjoy my family. But when it's time to come back to America, I'm going back home. And that's just the raw fact. Whenever I visited 3-4 days here and there, I always saw my parents, my family. But this is home for me.
As we were landing in Lagos, there was a rush of emotion, that came over me. In the sense of, this is truly home. I forget the movie, but the statement it said that there is no place like home. And I'll tell you what, I've always had, even when we came to the United States at 13 years old, I've always had this vision that I want to do something in my homeland that's productive and ultimately elevates people.
So, what would you tell new or incoming immigrants about the America of today?
I tell them it's not as easy as it looks on TV.
Yes.
You have to work hard. You have to work very hard. Milk and honey is not flowing on the streets, and it is the land of the free and the home of the brave. You have to be very, very brave to live here.
What do you use as a gauge to be able to navigate how you interact with your own children, how it might have to adapt based on cultural or system differences, and how can you maybe glean some advice for others in terms of where to look for inside or outside to be able to navigate those differences?
Yeah, I would certainly say that the family unit is one that you have to value. I learned that from my parents. I've always determined that I would make sure that my young boys understand, where their fathers stand in terms of his standards, his love for them. So I would say you cannot neglect the family structure.
The key is, how do you define home? That is the key. Some people define home as their place of birth. Some people define home as where you are comfortable. And some people define home as where your nuclear family is. So whatever the case may be, whatever definitions you hold, that is what should guide your individual decision as to where you want to live for the rest of your life.
We have come to the end of Season 1 of Desire Dilemma. We thank you all for your support. In Season 1, we brought you immigrant stories that we hope made you laugh, some that got you emotional, that encouraged and gave you hope. Desire Dilemma will be on hiatus for a short while. After our short break, we shall return with vibrant, engaging, and encouraging immigrant stories. Our counselors will intervene in challenging matters. While we are on our break, please continue to visit and enjoy Season 1 of Desire Dilemma. Continue to share and subscribe. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate you. Enjoy your day.